Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in for another episode. If you're new here, hi, I'm Madison. I am a Reiki master, a medium, and I do Akashic records. Right now, I am starting a series where we are going to be talking about different goddesses. And so there's a lot of just misconceptions, misinformation, misunderstanding around the different goddesses. And we're going to unpack a ton of different goddesses in this series. So I have a book club where we have been meeting on this book called You Are a Goddess, and basically it takes you through working with 9 different goddesses, and I'm going to be sharing all of that with you guys. So I also have a circle that me and my friend Veronica do called Her Sacred Circle, and there we also focus on divine feminine energy and work with goddesses. It's different than the book club, like it's just kind of 2 different ways of connecting with divine feminine, depending on if you like to read or if you more like interactive activations, meditations, community, that sort of thing. So Kali is the goddess that we are going to talk about today for the beginning of our goddess series. So Kali was one of the first goddesses that I started working with, and I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about her, my experiences working with Kali. I actually wrote down like 3 different times that I was working with her, and one of the times I actually didn't realize. So it's interesting. Sometimes you can be working with different goddesses or different deities and not actually know until after the fact and you kind of put the pieces together. So, who is Kali? A Hindu Indian goddess. She's like the OG goddess. So, basically, the term goddess was coined because of Kali. And she is also known as Devi, which is universal life. So, me and Veronica just did Her Sacred Circle last month on Kali, and we described her as the Tower card. And it sounds bad, but it's like nobody wants to get the Tower card, but everybody's a better person on the other side of the Tower moment. So, let's talk about that. I wrote down like my one-liner of who is Kali, the goddess of transformation, not hand-holding. There are some goddesses, they're gonna hold your hand, they're gonna help you, they're gonna love you. Not Kali. She's like, this has gotta go. You've been putting up with this for too long. Why have you been allowing this person to stay? Why have you been allowing, all these things that we put up with, right? And so her themes are death, rebirth, transformation, chaos, destruction, and a lot of people unknowingly have kind of pre-lifetime contracts to work with Kali. What I mean by that is whenever we come into this life, we have our contracts of kind of who our guides are going to be, whether it be different goddesses, angels, past loved ones, ascended masters. I believe we have variations of all of those on our spirit team, but whenever we specifically have contracts to work with certain goddesses or deities or whatever, it's always because that experience is going to put us on a path to understanding, enlightenment, the next version of self, whatever that looks like. So originally I thought my first time working with Kali was about a year ago in California. But as I was writing my notes out, there was a time that came through where I was like, oh, wait, I didn't realize that this was actually the first time that Kali came into my life because we had a contract. So what I mean by that is I was able to see that Kali has been a guide for me in past lifetimes, right? And so in this lifetime, she essentially had a contract to be able to come in whenever I was getting off track. Sorry, I had to look down at my notes. If you invite her in or have contracts with her, mine was don't let me get off track. She will cause a lot of change, but it will ultimately be change for the better and change we would have never made ourselves. So a couple years ago, I worked in the corporate world doing corporate HR for about 10 years. I actually have a master's degree in human resources, and that's what I did before I was into the spiritual work that I do now. And for like the last, I don't know, a couple years I was doing HR, I knew I wasn't aligned, but I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I was new in the world of recovery. I was still in the closet with a lot of my spiritual gifts, and I had no idea what I was supposed to be doing, but I was so engrossed in the job that I had that like I never could have had the time to explore my gifts in the way that I have now to allow my business to unfold if I had stayed in that job. So probably 3 years ago now, maybe. I was in my last corporate job and I found myself in a situation where I pretty quickly ended up like not working there anymore. And there was pretty much just like one big incident, and then it was like, bam, next thing you know, I am like having my resignation, accepted early, and, all these different things. And so I'm like, what the F am I supposed to do? And it was very stressful because I knew that like it was intentional. Like I'd been getting so many signs and messages of like, this is not where you're supposed to be. You're not in alignment. You need to make a move. And I just hadn't. And so it's almost like whenever you won't make a move, the universe or Kali or your guides or whoever sometimes makes your situation so uncomfortable that you're like forced to make a move, right? And that's kind of what happened to me. I wrote down the rug pull moment. And it was, I wrote down, I tower carded myself into being unemployed. And this forced me to full send my spiritual gifts in business. And I didn't know that this was the first time Kali was coming in to say, hey, you're so out of alignment. You got to make different decisions. And here's what I mean by this. So I worked in the corporate world for about 10 years, and I had like 2 or 3 jobs back to back where like the business was sold and my job went away. And what did I do? I just went out and got another job, and then the same thing happened. And I kept ending up in these situations, and I didn't realize that it was literally my guide's way of being like, this is not where you're supposed to be. Let us close this door. Let us close this door. Let us close this door. And finally I was like, oh, okay, I get it. I'm a slow learner. Don't know if y'all are, but sometimes I don't get the hints until after the fact. And I'm like, oh, y'all were trying to tell me for a while that was not, where I needed to be. And I knew that deep down. I just didn't know how else to make money because I had really only made money through working in restaurants and bars and through doing HR. And so I was like, well, what are other ways to make money? And everybody wants their passion to be their job, but I just didn't know how to bring that together. And it took me a long time to kind of figure out what that looked like and how to actually feel confident in my gifts and also let go of all of the people and limiting beliefs that kept me from fully stepping into those gifts at the same time. Okay, so that's a time that I worked with Kali that I had no idea that she was even there. So next time, or first time that I actively knew I was working with her, I went to California probably like a year ago for a work trip. And essentially, I thought I had kind of like leveled up in manifestation, right? Like I thought I had manifested this like great work opportunity. It didn't turn out to be that great. I'm not going to go into details because it's not anything negative about the people that I worked with. It's just how the cookie crumbles sometimes, right? And so how the cookie crumbled is I thought I was getting this big like quantum leap moment, and then I ended up getting not that, right? And that's just how life goes sometimes, right? And essentially I knew there was like an underlying reason and something going on, but I couldn't figure out what it was. And then it came through very clearly that like I thought I was ready for something that I wasn't. And I was needing to be honest with myself about some of my intentions. And some of my intentions were just to kind of skip past the phase of growing and putting in the work to just being in this phase of like explosive growth, right? And if you're a business owner, you can relate to that. But if you're a business owner, you also know that's a little bit unrealistic sometimes. So Kali showed me some areas that needed to be ripped away and also allowed me to be honest with myself about how much of my intentions are ego driven versus mission driven, right? Because as humans, so much of what we do is operated on a subconscious level by our ego. And I was shown so many ways where like I make decisions based off of ego rather than what's the best decision. And that's never where you want to be. So I've done a lot of work around that since that time period. And now I feel like whenever I'm making decisions based off of ego, I can notice that in the moment and almost be the observer of that and then be like, okay, if I wasn't operating off ego, what would I do in this situation? So that's a big theme with Kali as well, is if you have places where your ego is holding you back, that's going to be areas that are going to be revealed as well. The other big message that I wrote down with, again, working with Kali in California, sometimes the things we want feel different than what we expect. And so I, for example, on this trip to California, I thought I was going to do this like 10-day like camping backpacking excursion. And after 5 days in a tent, I was like, holy shit, get me out of this tent, right? And so it's funny because I had like saved all this like tent inspo. I thought it was going to be great. And I had done camping before, but never this long. And so the last like 5 days, I just ended up paying for like a tiny home to stay in. But it's interesting because I kind of glamorized this experience in my mind, and then I got there and I had the experience, and I was like, oh, this actually isn't this fun for this long like maybe I thought it was going to be. So it's always interesting whenever you go into an experience and you think it's going to be one thing and you get another thing, because you always learn a lesson about perception as well, you know? Okay, second time. So last month we did, no, this month, yeah, January, we did, it's just been a week or two since we did it, I guess 2 weeks. So we did our Her Sacred Circle. Me and Veronica have this circle that meets every second Thursday of the month. And if you want to learn more about it, linked in my website, linked in the bio, all the things. And so Her Sacred Circle, we unpack a different aspect of the divine feminine or a different goddess that's tied to the divine feminine. So this past month we did Kali, and so I was like, okay, gonna go back, reconnect with Kali, bring her back in, figure out like what do I need to do now, like after all this time has passed, I've done a lot of work, what do I still need to be doing? And a big thing that I asked her for was self-awareness. Like, can you give me the self-awareness to know like when I'm the problem, I'm the villain, I'm the one that is in the wrong even if I think I'm in the right? Like, can you give me that self-awareness? And here's the thing, I wouldn't recommend this unless you truly want it. Like, there's been so many times since I said that I've been like, oh my God, I'm the problem in so many areas. And so it's been a really, really humbling experience, because ultimately, like, we all need these experiences to grow, right? To be able to have a perspective that's not your own, and to be able to see things through the perspective of others rather than through the perspective of your own intentions or your own thoughts. So the second time I worked with Kali, I got a lot of awareness around places I was still holding myself back, and also how I allow others to hold me back. Here's what I mean by that. There are people in my life that suck a little bit of my energy, that maybe are a little bit judgmental about what I do. And I had to learn to set not only like personal boundaries, but also energetic boundaries around these people and these relationships, right? Because I was allowing myself to do or not do things based on what I thought people around me would or wouldn't judge me for, if that makes sense, which is like so delusional, because at the end of the day, I don't know what other people are thinking. And so I'm making a decision off of what I perceive them to be thinking. Like, it's crazy, right? So this whole circle of nonsense was being shown to me through this second time of working with Kali. And the biggest thing that came through was, how do I release my ego, or how do I know when I've released my ego? Is whenever you can get to the point where something happens that triggers you, and you don't react. And not you don't react as like you stuff it all down in the moment, but you're actually able to say, okay, I'm aware this is happening. I'm going to kind of step out of human me and kind of step into like observer mode, because I want to be able to observe the situation objectively and kind of figure out what's going on before I just immediately react. This is a hard practice. If you're somebody like me who like, you love to react, you love to have the last word, you love to have something to say, this is a hard practice. It really is. But I realized the other day something happened that normally would have triggered me, and I was just like, okay, okay, that's, it happens. And here's the thing, is a lot of times we have expectations, and then those expectations don't come through, and then we're disappointed, right? And that's when we react, is because we have expectations of people, places, or things that we can't control. And this is something where there was a person that I have no control over that did something that I didn't particularly agree with, and it was this moment of just like, normally I would have been triggered or wanted to have something to say, and I was just like, okay, like, objectively, it's their life, they can choose what to do with it. And that's hard, but it's something that now that I've been able to get to the other side of it, it's so freeing, because I'm just like, oh yeah, everybody literally has their own life, they're operating through their own reality, everybody most of the time is doing what they genuinely do think is best, even if it doesn't make any freaking sense. So if you invite Kali in to work with her, or if you were like me and you have contracts set up to work with Kali before you come into this life, She will cause a lot of change, but it will ultimately be change for the better, and it'll usually be change that you maybe felt like you didn't have the courage to make on your own. So it's always going to propel you to that higher timeline, but you always have to lose a timeline to, or let go of a timeline to move to a new one, right? And that change can be scary. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If there's any goddesses you guys want to hear more about, just drop it in the comments. I will be doing the next goddess will be Kuan Yin that we'll talk about. So that'll be in February after her sacred circle, where we're going to do Kuan Yin as the topic there. So if you guys want to join her sacred circle in Greensboro, link is in my bio. If you guys would subscribe to the channel and like, it would mean so much to me. And a few other things. If you want to work with me or learn more, I do have a 5D Ascension membership. This 5D Ascension membership is designed to take you from 3D to 5D by doing things such as teaching you how to access your Akashic records, connect with your higher self, do past life regressions, and there's different channeled messages that come in brand new every single week exclusive for this membership. If you want to see a sneak peek of what it's like, I have an astral travel and remote viewing episode that just came out, and that is actually something that normally we just go to my 5D membership, but I wanted to give you guys a little tease of what that looks like over here on YouTube. Okay, if you want to work with me one-on-one, I do offer one-on-one Akashic Records readings, which is tapping into things like your soul purpose, your past lives, your soul contracts, or really just any general guidance that you're looking for around your spiritual gifts, spiritual purpose, next steps, whatever that looks like. So I do videos here on YouTube every Tuesday and Thursday. I would love to have you join me for the next one. And as always, happy healing.